Good afternoon and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today I'm interviewing Maya Ajmera, the President and CEO for Society for Science and the Public and the publisher for Science News. Society for Science looks to promote the understanding and appreciation for science and is best known for its distinguished competitions such as the Regeneron Science Talent Search and Regeneron ISEF. Ms. Ajmera has also founded the Global Fund for Children, a nonprofit that invests in organizations which help underserved children. Mr. Mera, it's a privilege and I'm truly honored to interview you today. My name is Raul Kaboru. I'm a junior at St. Paul School in New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots. And so the first question that we always ask is, what are your company roots or your roots, and how did they help you in shaping your ideas and becoming the person you are today?
Well, I'm the daughter of Indian immigrants.
Mhm.
My parents are from India. They came here for higher education. My dad came here to get a PhD in electrical engineering at the University of Iowa. But I was brought up in Eastern North Carolina, in Greenville. So that's where my roots are. I'm a North Carolinian, Southerner by heart. My dad was a professor at East Carolina University in physics, as well as my mother was an entrepreneur.
Awesome. So yeah, my parents are also born in India, and they definitely had a tremendous impact on my life. So for everyone to be successful, we all know that there's a great role model behind them. So who would you say is your inspiration and mentor for your success? And how do they impact you and develop your social impact roots?
So I would say there's several people
Mhm.
who really inspired me. I think my mother has been a big inspiration in terms of her entrepreneurial sort of spirit. I would say my mentor that I did my seventh and eighth grade science project is somebody named Dr. Prem Sagal, who I
Mhm.
worked in his botany lab for 2 years. And I would say Dr. Margaret Holliday at college, whose lab I worked in as well. And I would say that I've just been very grateful to have a slew of mentors as well as sponsors, people who've
Definitely.
sponsored me that have pushed me forward.
Awesome. And just only in your second year as president and CEO for Society for Science, you spearheaded a $100 million 10-year sponsorship for the Science Talent Search with Regeneron. And so looking back, what would you say are some of the biggest ways in which you transformed this organization into its current stage?
Well, one, when I came on, I knew that Intel was going to not sponsor the Science Talent Search, which I competed in, which was called Westinghouse Science Talent Search, um, and the International Science and Engineering Fair. So I had to look for new sponsors, and we were very fortunate to have Regeneron come in. And what's so interesting about Regeneron is not only are they a cutting edge biotech pharmaceutical company, but
Right.
the two founders, Len Schleifer and George Yancopoulos, are alums of our competitions. So they competed in the Science Talent Search. So that's been a big win. The
Yeah,
other
definitely.
is that Science News was really struggling, like all magazines and newspapers.
Mhm.
And I had to turn that magazine around, or we would have to shut it down. And so we were able to do that with starting a program called Science News in high schools, where we wanted to make sure that science teachers got the best evidence-based content to teach their students
Right.
about science and engineering. And in 2015, we started with 250 schools, and today we're in over 5,000 high schools,
Wow.
which has become, in many ways, a saving grace for Science News.
Mhm.
It's really helped support its work going
Got it.
forward.
And on that note of high schoolers, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's so much more room for innovation. So, what advice would you give to those students who are really looking to enter these established science competitions such as Regeneron in terms of developing out of the box research ideas?
So I actually believe that in times of crisis,
Hmm.
ingenuity and innovation occurs.
Definitely.
And this is occurring with young people throughout the United States and around the world who are in their homes. They have more time because perhaps their extracurriculars aren't as happening, or other things. So it's given them a time to explore.
Hmm.
And I would say that um, we're seeing, I'll give an example. For example, the Regeneron Science Talent Search. We were hopefully going to get maybe 800 applications this year for the Science Talent Search. We ended up getting nearly 1,800.
Wow.
That is a regular year for us. Like nothing had really changed or shifted. And the same thing for the International Science and Engineering Fair. We may have our biggest virtual competition ever.
Hmm.
So, um, so I actually think students are using what's at home and thinking very creatively. Last year, we saw nearly 60% of the projects being done at home, actually.
Yeah.
Kids can actually work with big data sets. They can do a lot of interesting engineering projects, environmental climate change projects.
Mhm.
So I'm really interested to see what's going to happen this year with the projects coming through.
Definitely. Yeah. And I actually interviewed someone last week who kind of instilled this quote in me that as an entrepreneur, really using a pain point as an opportunity is something that's really impactful, especially with the pandemic going around. And so your work and life story have been profiled by CNN, Financial Times, and many other distinguished news outlets. And moreover, you are the recipient of the 2020 National Science Board Public Service Award. And so I watched your TED Talk discussing obligation. And so how have moments of obligation in your past allowed you to take impactful action?
So I actually had, I would say it's called a moment of obligation.
Mhm.
And when I was in college, I received a fellowship, the Rotary International Graduate Fellowship, to travel for a year. And I was on my way to get an MD PhD. I was, I knew what I was going to do, right? But I got this fellowship that allowed me to travel from Thailand to Pakistan for 1 year.
Oh, wow.
And I had wonderful professors said, you want to really understand people and understand their aspirations, get a backpack and start traveling for a year.
Mhm.
And so I traveled, and it was in India, where my parents are from, that I had what I call my moment of obligation. I was on a train platform. If you've ever been on a train platform, they're chaotic places, but among that chaos in Bhubaneswar, India, I saw 50 kids sitting in a circle learning how to read, and a teacher in the middle teaching them with flashcards. And these teachers were obviously, these children were obviously very poor. And I asked the teacher what was going on, and she said, these children live on and around the train platform. They
Mhm.
work, they play, they eat, they beg, they sleep, but they don't go to school. And so a social entrepreneur came to the train platform and said, instead of bringing the children to the school, I'm going to bring the school to the train platform. And so she started a school on the train platform. And I asked, like, what does it cost to run one of these schools?
Mhm.
And the teacher said, in those days, it was about $500 a year for two teachers and a hot meal every day. And that's where I had what I call the moment of obligation of how do I help and how come I don't see more train platform schools all over India? So I took that moment of obligation. I put off the MD PhD, got my master's in public policy at Duke University, and I founded the Global Fund for Children, which has really been built on investing small amounts of capital into really innovative grassroots organizations globally. And the organization is thriving. They've invested nearly $50 million in over 800 grassroots groups throughout the world.
Awesome. And definitely using that moment of obligation from a personal experience and using it as an opportunity to really help the community is a very inspiring thing. And so the Global Fund for Children has awarded 50 million to 700 grassroots organizations globally, serving around 11 million children. So how do you decide in which organizations to invest in? And what are some of the values, qualities, and mission statements you're looking for in these community-based nonprofits?
So, you would need to interview the CEO, John Hecklinger, for all that information. I haven't been with Global Fund for over nearly 10 years now. But I will say this, what they're looking for are really innovative grassroots leaders
Right.
that are really transforming and bringing new ways of doing and supporting the work of children and youth, frankly. We want to make sure every young person in this world can grow up to become a productive, caring citizen of the world, and to make sure that their rights are protected. And so that's what we started with at the Global Fund for Children, and that's what's still happening. And the organizations that they are supporting are quite extraordinary. And I would encourage everyone who's listening to go to www.globalfundforchildren.org.
That's awesome. And so for Society for Science, how do you guys raise funding for your competitions?
So we have our title sponsor, Regeneron, and Broadcom for the middle school, Broadcom Foundation for the middle school competition. And then we have lots of funders that come in and support our work, from Microsoft to National Geographic, to Johnson and Johnson, to family foundations, to government agencies. We're part of a really interesting network of organizations that's part of a DoD STEM network, the Department of Defense STEM network. So it takes a different types of revenue to make an organization work. You don't want to count on just one piece of revenue, right?
Right.
It's like buying stock, right? You don't buy one stock, you actually buy lots of them, so you diversify your portfolio. And that's what we've done well at the Society. We have a lot of individual donors, and anyone watching this can go to www.societyforscience.org.
Of course. And you yourself have also involved yourself in so many different ways in kind of helping the community. So you served as a visiting professor at the School of Public Policy at Duke and also professional lecturer at Johns Hopkins University. And so what would you say are your biggest takeaways as a former teacher?
Well, I still continue to teach,
Okay.
and um, I would say I love the opportunity to teach every year
Hmm.
to the next generation of students, and they know so much more than I do, and it's extraordinary to learn from them. Their ability with what they have at their fingertips around data, around reporting, around visualizations, around travel is extraordinary. And when you bring in a group of students with such diverse backgrounds, it becomes, a melting pot of ideas and new ways of thinking. And I always say I love to learn from my students.
Yeah. And can you describe some of those really good experiences you had with certain very, very innovative individuals and students?
Sure. I think of two students who were my students
Mhm.
who were on the road to starting a nonprofit organization to provide a full-blown advocacy effort to elevate the voices of children and youth globally. I have been enamored with my students that have gone on to work in government and taking what I've taught in the world of children and youth and their needs, and use that in working for USAID or the Foreign Service or wherever they end up going. Um, I would say each one is unique, and I wouldn't point out any singular person because I think each person brings a singular gift to the classroom.
And I'm sure you impacted them definitely as their professor. And kind of transitioning into some of the written publications, you have written over 20 books for both children and academics, such as Every Breath We Take and Invisible Children, and are the publisher for Science News. So, how do you strive to find the balance in the subject matter you write about?
Well, I've been writing children's books since 1996.
Wow,
So it's something that I say it's my left brain, or right brain, left brain. It keeps me sane. I enjoy doing it. And it's fun to write for children, and I've gotten pretty good at it. So um, the second piece is I after leaving the Global Fund for Children, I ended up um, going to the School for Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins and becoming a visiting scholar. And I wrote a book on really what I had learned over the last 17 years of building the Global Fund for Children. And that book was called Invisible Children, Reimagining International Development at the Grassroots.
hmm,
And then as publisher of Science News, I'm not a science journalist, but I'm on the business end. I make
got it.
sure that the newsroom, which is one of the few newsrooms left in the United States of science beat journalists. I have journalists that have PhDs in their specific fields
Oh,
that
wow,
are everyday science, right, for the public. And the new discoveries coming out. I end up making sure they have the resources they need to be able to do their work.
definitely. And you really also need that business aspect in kind of like the journalism field. And
Absolutely.
so you have done a lot of work in terms of actually creating more innovation worldwide. And so could you, if you could, do you think you could pinpoint one specific moment in your life where you really were motivated and dedicated to actually creating innovation in the world?
So, I don't know if you've ever seen Steve Jobs's graduation speech at Stanford University. It's a very famous speech that he gave, and there's a line in there that stuck very hard with me. He says you can never connect the dots looking forward in your life, but you can connect the dots looking backwards in your life. And so I feel like every single thing that's happened has brought me to where I am today. Okay. And, if one were to say, well, how did you start Global Fund for Children? I would say there were dots that connected me from my very early days of my parents taking me to India when I was a child in the summertime to visit my grandparents. And that had a very strong sort of impact in my life, right? To working in a lab that had a very strong impact in my life, to competing in the Westinghouse Science Talent Search that had a very, so you can start connecting the dots
Mhm.
backwards. You can't do it looking forwards, though.
Of course, yeah. And kind of looking forward, also, what direction do you think you're going to try to be leading society for science in the coming years, especially with all the new factors that COVID-19 has added?
So look, I came in 2014
Mhm.
making sure with the mantra of I want to make sure every young person in this country can become a scientist or engineer if that's what they want to be when they grow up. So
Right.
we have a suite of equity and inclusion programs at the society, and I want to continue scaling that work. Instead of 5,000 high schools getting science news in high schools, I want 10,000 high
Yeah.
schools. Right? I want all the high schools. If we have a mentoring program called the Advocate Program, we have 66 mentors started with zero that build a posse of underserved students who are doing research but get them to compete in competitions. And I want to get to 100. That's sort of the scale point that we want to be at. So there's a lot of different things I want to do over the next few years, but most of all, we need to get through this crisis that we're in.
Mhm.
And I'll
Definitely.
end with saying that, look, the young people who compete in our competitions, we have 13 Nobel Prize winners in our
Wow.
80-year history. But there's, when you think about Regeneron and their sponsorship, the two guys that I told you, Len Schleifer and George Yancopoulos,
Mhm.
co-founded Regeneron, they were on the forefront of one of the therapeutics that they created, okay, for COVID-19. The other therapeutic for COVID-19 came out of Eli Lilly. And the chief scientific officer, Daniel Skravansky, is one of our alums as well.
Wow.
So, talent, there's this incredible poster in one of my mentors' uh, offices. And this was during my time at Global Fund for Children. And it was at Goldman Sachs in London. And he's a partner at Goldman Sachs. His name is Michael Daffy, but he, has a desk and everything, but there's just one poster in his wall,
Mhm.
people, period. That's it.
Yeah.
Just think about it. When you think about the way the world is going to change and to make it better, it's people.
Right.
When you think about people, it's talent.
And it's definitely, it must be such an incredible feeling really seeing your alumni progress into and doing so many more incredible things in the world. And so the last question that we always ask in the interview
I'm
is,
an alum too, so
oh yeah, of course.
I take great pride.
Yep. It must be such like obviously an incredible feeling seeing the fellow people that you were studied alongside kind of doing work, um, and just having everyone grow and doing their own path and kind of making change in the world. And so the last question that we always ask in the interview is, what advice would you give to the current and next generation of high school and college students that would like to start the process to make a positive impact in society? And how would you recommend they start this process?
Follow your dreams.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid. You have time to take risks at this point in life and
Definitely.
take it. And if you fail, you learn a lot from failure, frankly. Do not be afraid. Science is about failing, frankly.
Mhm.
Do you know how many experiments scientists do or how many you know,
Countless, countless.
pointless, right? And things don't work, but when they don't work, they give you another answer, frankly. And so I just want to make sure young people know to follow their dreams, don't be afraid, um, and stay away from people who suck the passion out of you. Stay away from them. You want to be around people who will challenge you, but also be able to cheer you on.
I would say definitely um, pushing for that extra step in the science field is what truly creates like the best leaders in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for letting us interview today. It was an honor and a privilege